Hello YouTube. Alright, today we are going to be installing some shelves. They are from IKEA. They are the LACK shelves. So dad joke, they would lack instructions, and also because they're from IKEA, they lack proper mounting holes. When it comes to installing shelves like these, if you're going to put any kind of weight on them, you've really got to find the studs. You could use the drywall anchors, the style of drywall anchors, but I wouldn't recommend it. Even the blue ones are only rated for 23 pounds when installed in drywall, and these shelves alone have to weigh more than that. The ones that we're installing today, they are the 73-inch variety, so the shelves and the brackets alone gotta weigh at least the 23 pounds, I think. I didn't weigh them, but they're close. Then you start putting stuff on top of them, I wouldn't trust the anchors, so you really want to find studs. This is a reinstall of these shelves. I've had them installed before, so I did learn from experience that when they come from IKEA, the brackets where they've got the holes drilled at from the factory, they've got them on either side of the posts, because these particular shelves have these posts that stick into the shelf, and it turns out those holes don't really line up to studs. Studs in most residential homes are going to be 16 inches on center. Sometimes they're different, but that's going to be a pretty common measurement, and they don't have holes that line up to that for some reason. So a lot of times when you're going to install these, especially if you want to install it in a certain spot on a wall, you're going to end up drilling your own holes and just doing the best you can with it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be installing two shelves, and the idea is I'm going to make like an L shape along this wall. So I want one to overlap the other. That's going to be a little tough to get the heights correct and also to find studs. I'm going to end up probably drilling more holes inside the bracketry to line up the studs. But it's really important to me to find studs instead of trying to use drywall anchors. So we're going to go ahead. I got my stud finder out. So the bracket starts about a foot from the end of the shelf. So I'm going to go to the wall and I'm going to use my stud finder, and I'm going to start trying to find studs from about a foot out to, let's see, looks like about 5 feet 3 inches. So from a foot to about 5 feet 3 inches is the distance that I'm going to try to cover, looking for studs, and then see if I'm going to have to drill additional holes inside the bracket. Alright, so you want to find a good stud finder. I like this Craftsman one pretty well. It's got two different settings for 1.5 inch deep read, which is important when you've got plaster walls, or these walls are actually 2 layers of drywall due to a construction error that happened when the basement was remodeled. So it helps to have the deep read instead of just the standard read. So anyway, these shelves are going to go just above this guitar, so I'm leaving it there for reference. And I'm just going to move along with the stud finder. Okay, so we're going to slide along here, and it's going to indicate that we found an edge. So I'm going to mark that. I'm not sure. There must be a board back there that it's indicating it's longer than just a normal stud. So I'm going to put a second one there. I'm going to keep moving over here. Alright, so we're finding another edge. And that's indicating that it must be doubled up on the other side of this wall, because it's indicating that they're extra long or extra wide. Mark that. I think that was a false alarm there. So we'll go ahead and erase it. It's showing some really wide studs here. I'm finding it unlikely that they're actually that many or that wide. right, so now we've got some approximate locations where there's studs at. I can actually reach the back side of this wall. I'm gonna go check it out because some of these seem like they're too darn thick. I want to go see what it actually looks like on the other side of this wall. Okay, now that the studs are properly marked, or at least approximately marked with pencil spots, so I know that it's in between these gaps. Now I want to try to figure out where I'm going to place the bracket at. So we know that the bracket starts about a foot out from the wall. So that's actually perfect because a foot out from the wall is right here. So the first holes on the bracket looks like they might just catch the stud. So that's pretty fortunate. We can hold the bracket up there, like right in between. We'll mark the spot to know that that's approximately where the bracket's gonna start at. I'll give it a little bit extra, like a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch extra in case the walls aren't square. But that's a good place to start, where hold the shelf up and see how well it lines up to where the studs might be. All right, so I'm holding the bracket up to where it needs to be. I'm gonna miss this stud unless I drilled some holes here. But it looks like between this stud, which the stud finder is showing it to be extra wide. I looked on the back side, it's really not. So I'm gonna assume it's in the middle of this, but I'll try with these existing holes and see if they catch the stud or not. If not, I can drill more holes in the bracket. These holes that I previously drilled, they're gonna miss this stud, but these factory holes, they're gonna hit that stud. So I think I'm actually gonna start here, and I'm gonna put one hole through, and then I'm gonna put a screw in so I can put a level on here, and I can pivot it up and down to make sure that I get my bracket leveled, and I can start figuring out if I'm gonna hit studs on the back sides or if I'm gonna need to drill additional holes in this bracket. I think probably 3 sets of screws would be enough to hold this up. I don't need more than that. I got extra holes I drilled in the past, but I'm not putting a whole lot of weight on this shelf. But and if I'm hitting studs, I think 3 sets should be enough. 2 might even be enough, but you can see it's kind of wobbly. So I really think that 3 is probably preferred over to 2. Let's start with 2 and give it a shot, because there's going to be a second shelf overlapping. And with any luck, it's going to have, I'll be able to hit more studs easier over there without drilling holes in the steel. This steel is actually pretty hard stuff considering it's IKEA. I've drilled holes through it before, and it takes a little bit of effort to grind through there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and position this. All right, I think I like it. Right about there's pretty good. So we're gonna mark a hole here and down here, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna drill a pilot hole and make sure I'm hitting the stud, and then put a screw through it so I'll be able to pivot this bracket up and down before I start putting other holes in it. All right, so put me a piece of post-it note, fold it over underneath where I'm gonna drill holes at, and it catches the drywall dust, catches any sawdust. The stud finder worked great, so I'm into the wood there. All right, so we just pull this off the wall now, and it's got our dust contained, and can just throw that away. Okay, we got our holes drilled, got our bracket set about where we're going to want it. We're going to end up using this hole, so we're just going to put a screw in. Okay, you don't want to run it down all the way, because what we want to be able to do now is pivot this shelf a little bit, pivot this bracket, so that we can make sure we're seeing where our stud markings are, but more importantly, so we can put a level on it and make sure when we drill additional holes that it's going to be level. So that's why I do one end instead of multiple holes first, just so I can be able to pivot this thing. All right, this part of the job would really help to have 2 people, but you can do it yourself. So I've got the screw in here, bracket can pivot, and I actually got lucky. I'm holding it against the wall and I've got a level sitting on top of it, and it turns out I eyeballed it pretty well. It's just about level right where I had it. So I'm going to go ahead and hold it level there. Oh shoot. Okay, so we marked the studs previously. There's one of our marks. So we think that this hole here should line up to a stud. And it turns out it did not line up to a stud. That just went straight through. So that's actually a wasted hole unless I put a drywall anchor in it, because again, like I said earlier, I don't trust these shelves without studs. So I think the stud must be over a little bit, even though the stud finder seems to think that there's a stud right there. There apparently isn't. So I'm probably gonna have to drill a hole in the metal. Okay, so I located where the stud was, and I located a spot that would be in the middle of the stud on the bracket, and I ended up drilling a hole through the bracket, through the drywall, and into the stud. I held the level up against it before I started drilling the hole, so I made sure that the bracket is level. And now I'm going to go ahead and put a screw in here, make sure that everything's still level. Then I'll drill one more hole and set another screw into another stud, and we should be done with this shelf and be able to move on to the next shelf after that's set. Okay. All right, put the level back up. And it's pretty close. It's off just a little bit, but it's not bad. All right, pretty darn close. So I can run this other screw down tight now. Looks like I need a new drill battery. And I'm gonna put in one more hole over here and put one more screw in, and that should be enough to hold this thing. 2 would probably be enough because you're in the studs. If you were using drywall anchors, you'd want to use a lot more, but I don't think 2 is enough because there's so much distance over here and this would be floppy. I'm going to add a third one just for the strength of it. And if I was really going to be packing a lot of weight on here, I'd be doubling these up. I might, but I'm not putting much weight on these, and I know I'm into studs with 3-inch long screws, so I'm not overly worried about it. Okay, I drilled the extra hole through the metal, got into the stud, put a real thick heavy duty screw in there, and this thing isn't going anywhere. This is real solid. If I start thinking that I'm going to put too much weight on it or that it's not solid enough, then I'll end up putting some extra screws in, doubling them up. But I think being these great big screws that I'm using, they're like 1/8-inch screws, I think, by 3 inches or 3.5 inches into the studs. I don't think that it's going to go anywhere. All right, we're going to slide the shelf on, see how we did. Hope that it doesn't hit the wall over on the other side. There we go. Slides right on. It's pretty darn steady. Of course, it could always be sturdier, but for all the weight that's going on there, it's just going to be some 12-inch GI Joes and some collectible junk. That should be plenty. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. So now the next shelf is going to butt up against this to make like an L bracket or L shape, and it's going to run along this wall. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that now. Okay, I got the other bracket mounted up now. Just like the other one, I had to shoot holes through the bracket itself because nothing was going to line up to any marks where studs were. So I ended up having to drill new holes through the bracket, but this thing is solid, very steady. And again, I'm not putting a lot of weight on it. If I was, I would add some more holes or maybe use some drywall anchors or double up the screws. But I got some big fat screws on there and I think it's going to be pretty solid. I'm going to put it on and hope that it lines up. I held this one in place with a level on top of it with the shelf in place, and then I drew a line across there, and I knew it was a 1/2 inch down to the mounting holes. Then I ended up having to drill new mounting holes. So I hope it lines up just the way it should. If not, I might have to put like a little L bracket or something in the corner there to hold the two shelves together to make them so they look presentable. There we go. All right, so it doesn't quite line up. I think that this bracket is actually bent over here. So I'm gonna end up putting a little piece of L bracket underneath here, and it'll hold these two shelves, or I might do on the top actually, to hold the two shelves together, because they do line up in the back, but they don't line up in the front. So I think that's a function. I can actually see this one's leaning. I think that the bracket itself is bent, so I don't know if I can bend it back. Maybe I could take it off the wall and flip it over and put it back on and see if that'll make up the difference. Otherwise, like I said, I'll have to put a little L bracket on there, or just a little mending plate to hold these two together, because they do line up across the bottom. It's a matter of getting them, or in the back, it's a matter of getting them to line up in the front. Yeah, this one's definitely angled, so I think that it's that bent bracket. All right, I'll take it off and try bending a little bit. Okay, I was able to bend the bracket a little bit. So now they line up in the front where it actually matters. It doesn't line up quite exactly in the back. Like I said, I could put a little bit of mending plate across there, but as long as it lines up in the front and that both shelves are reasonably level, that's all that really matters. If it was in my living room, I'd probably care about that. But being in the basement, as long as that front edge is reasonably close and the shelves line up, they're the same height from the ceiling and they're level, I'm gonna call that good enough. These IKEA LACK shelves are not the funnest to install. They're not that awful. They actually look pretty good, and they're pretty darn sturdy too, especially depending upon making sure you hit the studs and how long the screws you use, how heavy duty. If you use drywall anchors, I don't know that I would trust them so much, because they are pretty heavy duty. I like the look of them, so now I'm gonna hang some pictures on the wall, then load these shelves up with some collectibles. Thanks for watching.